Hi, welcome. Nice to have you on this journey. So here we are looking at a masterclass titled "From Projects to Products: Designing Systems that Survive Political and Organizational Cycles." So this is actually very important because when we have, when we find ourselves in these political and organizational cycles, we are stuck between very short timelines, particularly for political cycles, where most countries actually have this 4-year term, 6-year term, 5-year term cycles for their leaders. And at that point, it actually becomes very difficult to actually design systems that go beyond these short timelines. And the focus at that point becomes on short-term quick wins, whereas you should actually be looking at, solving institutional problems that transcend these political organizational cycles. So thank you for joining me on this, and I hope you'll learn a lot from this. So the learning objective for us by the end of this session, as product managers, product leaders, and every participant involved, including founders and also political leaders, we should be able to distinguish clearly between project delivery and product management. Diagnose why persistent services fail under project-based thinking, apply product thinking to public and large organizational contexts, evaluate systems using a life cycle lens rather than a launch lens, um, design for continuity beyond leadership or political cycles, structure funding, governance, and teams for long-term impact, and identify immediate steps to pilot the product operating model. So once again, thank you for joining me on this journey. And I hope we'll be able to cover all these areas and gain some thinking towards actually designing and building systems that transcend political and leadership cycles and organizational cycles. Sorry. So why does this conversation matter? So most public and large organizational initiatives fail for one reason. They are treated as temporary projects. In fact, many of these projects actually just end at the ribbon cutting stage, where once the projects are commissioned, everything just dies down. There is a lot of energy at launch. They deliver against scope. They get celebrated at go live. Yes, there's a lot of celebration, but nobody asks the question, what happens beyond go live? And they also get abandoned at handover. You get nobody, there's no owner after handover. There is no ownership structure, no control measures, nothing. It just gets handed over, and that is it. So real problems are persistent, but we build temporary solutions. So people face problems that are persistent. There will always be, you know, difficulties in ease of doing business. There'll always be, these challenges here and there. But, when we build temporary solutions, we are not solving those problems. We are just building something that people will be excited about at launch date, but we need to change that thinking. So there's a structural mismatch to this. So the time horizon of delivery rarely matches the time horizon of the problem. So sometimes, again, 4-year cycles for political leaders. Some organizations actually have 5-year cycles for their CEOs and all that. And this doesn't match the time horizon of the problem. We have 4 years compared to problems that may, outlast, run to 20 years or 10 years or 15 years. So short cycles actually plan around political cycles. So of course, a politician is looking for, quick wins that would win him the next election. So that means there is no incentive to actually plan beyond, his cycle. On the other hand, a leader for an organization is looking at making the shareholders happy, to keep staying on that seat, because while they have cycles, you know some things may also happen along the line. Confidence may be lost and all that. So it's quite difficult, and that's why short cycles plan around these 4 to 5 year cycles, budget cycles which are annually. So every year, the budgets actually focus on what do we build, what do we release, but there is little to no mention or on how do we run this once it's been released, how do we keep maintaining it, how do we keep running it once it's been launched. So there's also leadership tenure, which is usually short. I mean, 4 to 5 years is short for problems that, some problems would actually, sometimes you hear by 2035 or something, or by 2050, this is how this should go if we continue at this pace. Whereas the leaders in charge at that point just have 4 to 5 year cycles. So you see that, it doesn't work. And at that point, we need to build institutional systems that will keep these things running. On the other hand, long cycle problems actually live on social problems, which are long term, citizen behavior, which, they are slow to change, infrastructure and institutions, multi decade. On citizen behavior, sometimes we actually build things that, we just build things without even having reasons for building it. There's no data-driven mindset behind building these things. So at that point, we build systems that people don't use or systems that don't even make any sense to the problems people face. So we need to actually align these short-term cycles and long-term building, sustaining long-term projects so that, we're actually solving problems, not just, making people excited every time we cut ribbons for projects. So what is a project? So a high-level perspective based on what we are looking at, a project is designed to finish. So a project has, there's fixed scope, fixed timeline, fixed budget, defined end date, and the success is actually equal to delivery. So projects optimize for completion. So a project is just designed around, this is the scope. Sometimes you even have a scope creep. They say, no, it's out of scope. Let's focus on the scope. So a project looks at the scope alone. There's a timeline. There's a fixed budget for it. There is a defined end date. And the success is really delivery. As the project ended, yes, yay, everybody is happy. But on the other hand, what is a product? So a product is designed to endure and improve. Endure and improve. So a product is ongoing. It is outcome driven, not output driven. A product is continuously improved, Kaizen, continuous improvement. A product is continuously improved. It is adaptable to policy, user needs, and technology change. So when policies change, when regulations change, it has to be adaptable to it. Again, it has to change the user needs too. It also has to change the technology needs. So if you move from a time where you have typewriters, and then you move to where you have phones and all that and laptops and the rest of that, then your product should also be adaptable to those technological changes. So, and it should be measured over time. So products optimize for impact. Now, measuring over time, every single time your product outcome should be measured. So it's not just about saying, okay, how many things have we launched or how many things have we released, but how has this eased doing business, or how has this solved the housing crisis, or how has this solved poverty or something. So these are the traits of product. And when you juxtapose a project, you see that products are actually built to go on and on and on. The first point says it's ongoing and it's built to endure and improve. On the other hand, project is just built within a short time frame, fixed scope, fixed budget, and the success measure is actually have we delivered. So what is the hidden cost of project thinking? Of course, there would always be an opportunity cost. There would always be a hidden cost. So what do we pay for later when we treat services like projects? So no ownership after go live. Again, to the first slide where I talked about ownership, we need ownership after go live. So ownership is very important. In the RACI metrics, there is actually responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. So when you say accountable, so you need to have people who are accountable for the success of that product. It's not just about, launching things and just saying, yes, it's been handed over to this team. They will take care of it. or it's been handed over to this community. No, we actually need to build those sustainable ownership structures after go live. So vendor dependency becomes the operating model. Technical debt accumulates and nobody budgets to fix it. So technical debt is when you focus on short-term quick fixes, but then the long-term solutions that would actually give you that advantage are actually piling up, and there will be no money to fix those, to actually do those things. And at the end of the day, you hit that point where the project just stalls and nothing happens again. There's also no iteration based on real usage. Most times projects actually lack metrics, monitoring metrics, and monitoring triggers to actually watch how it's being used and all that. So, and when you don't have that, then you're actually not building on what you have. You're just cruising and going on. So metrics disappear once the project closes. Again, to the earlier point, where metrics just end once the project ends. So the metrics should not just be about, okay, what have we delivered? Where are we? When can we deliver this? It should also go beyond that and into when the product launches. So why do political systems default to projects? So project thinking is rewarded because it's easier to package and easier to claim credit for. A lot of people sometimes, when we judge leaders, we say, oh, this happened at the time of this person, or this happened at the time of that person. Even when a new leader comes in and takes over that project, for instance, the credit is always given to the person who implemented it. Sometimes we even date some of these things down to the 80s and all that and all that. And this actually incentivizes project thinking over product thinking. So common drivers for project thinking is it's always easier to announce. It's easier to budget. When you're budgeting for just building something, you get, it's easier to budget for it than when you're budgeting for, oh, how do we keep this running? There are many areas to look at when you're talking about how do we keep this running over how do we start this. So it's also easier to attribute credit. Yes, you can always say, yes, it started with Arinze, for instance, and I'll always take credit for it. So, and it fits into electoral cycles. So imagine coming out to say, oh, I want us to build something that will be completed by 2050. A lot of people may not buy into that sort of thing. And, because it's not going to be completed by then, because I'm not going to be there until 2050, you know, it may also affect my opportunity or my chance to actually stay on for the next election or whatever and all that. So, but coming up with a package, something, oh, short term, 4 to 5 year cycle, everybody goes, everybody sleeps happy, fits into that cycle. Procurement structures favor one-off delivery. So procurement structures actually just favor, yes, it's just aimed for this delivery date, it's just aimed for this project, let's just bump it. So these are the political system, the reasons why political systems default to project thinking, projects. So what is the product operating model? So what changes when you move from project delivery to product management? So on funding, project has a capex, that capital expenditure style funding that ends after delivery. So capex funding just stops when delivery is completed, when the project is delivered. For products, there is persistent funding for outcomes and improvements. Again, as I said, it's quite easy to just budget for, okay, this is what we need, this is when we want it to end. On the other hand, it's more complex when you say, okay, outcomes and improvements. On ownership, project looks at temporary delivery team. On project, temporary delivery teams disband. They go on, they just end on once the project is delivered. But on product, accountable product owner and stable team. So you have accountable product owner and you have a stable team in place. Again, accountability. So on metrics for project, the metrics for project are always on time, on budget, on scope. But for products, the metrics are, you look at adoption, you look at usage, you look at cost to serve, and you also look at outcomes. So this is why, it's actually a safe bet for people to lie on when you talk about project thinking. So designing for continuity beyond administration. How do we go about it? A durable product is bigger than any individual administration. So design principles that create continuity, institutional memory over political memory. So we need to build for institutional memory. Remember, we need to put in institutional systems over, systems that just solve political problems. So public product vision, independent of personalities. So we need to think beyond, individuals. We need to think beyond this person's administration. We actually need to look at what is the vision of this product? What is this product solving? And measure it based on that, not based on who put it in place or when it was put in place and all that. So transparent service metrics, so performance cannot be hidden. Yeah, we also need to make the data public. We need to say that, yes, this system reduced poverty or improved the housing crisis by so number, and this should be visible. Everybody should be able to see it, through monthly releases, performance releases, quarterly releases, and so on, or annual releases too. So stable product leadership roles and multi-year roadmaps reviewed regularly. So you need to have ownership roles, product leadership roles, and multi-year roadmaps that are reviewed regularly. So it's not just about saying, oh, in 2026, you're already talking about Vision 2050, whereas you're not even putting, roadmaps in place that can be reviewed regularly. So for me, I would opine that, I would suggest that, we have realistic roadmaps that at every point in time, probably at the end of 3 years or at the end of 5 years, we can come together to say, okay, this is what we have achieved, this is what is left, and this is how we can build on this. This is how we can improve. So this example, so we're looking at a digital business licensing platform. So, and let's say that, a government, state government, for instance, is looking at, digitizing business licensing to improve ease of doing business and reduce processing delay. So the product approach, is 12-month delivery time. This is actually a real case, but, I won't mention the state or, whoever it is. It's also a vendor-led build focused on replacing paper forms with an online portal, probably automating the whole process of business licensing and all that. And success is defined at system launch. So when they just launch the system, ribbon cutting, pictures taken, and that's a success for them. Post the pictures everywhere, and you can see where the problem comes from. You see, there's already a timeline for it, and there's no plan beyond that timeline. And success is just defined as success as system launched. So we can see where the problem comes from. So again on it, so what happened after go live? Adoption stayed low because the offline process kept running in parallel. So yes, because this is actually what we call parallel running in launch. We have the big bang, where you cut off the old system and you start the new system the next day or immediately. Then you also have parallel running where both of them run for a while, and at some point one gets for the other. So, but the offline process kept running, and that created a parallel running situation. So manual verification remained the bottleneck. So there was still manual verification in place because the system was just designed as a project. It was just designed to, let's just launch, nothing beyond that. No analytics on drop-offs or processing time. Budgets ended after deployment. There was no budget for improvements, enhancements, or even looking at user behavior and all that. So within 3 years, the system was outdated and fragile. Of course, from the way the project was planned, we can actually tell that this would be the outcome. So, and this is why project thinking, is not sustainable for the long run. So where did it go wrong? There was no product owner, no behavior change strategy for staff and citizens. This is very important because there's what we call the puppet model. So where you look at the people, organization, processes, and IT infrastructure. In this case, they've only considered the IT infrastructure, but it's actually holistic because you also need to look at the people, you need to look at the processes, and you also need to look at the organization, in this case, the public outfit that did it. So um, there should be some behavior change management for strategy for the staff and people, some awareness and orientation to go on. No continuous funding for improvements, of course. We talked about that earlier, and no iteration based on feedback. It was just based on assumptions. It should be serving fine. It should be working fine for the people who use them. So let's just carry on. But iterations should be based on data-driven feedback. So transition to product thinking. So had they moved to product thinking, or if they want to move to product thinking, this is how things would have been different. So appoint a permanent product owner inside the ministry. Yeah, where you have a product owner who would be responsible for, you know, that product, the success of that product beyond the launch date. Um, Shift success metrics to time to license approval or time to success. So also when you're looking at time to success, you need to define what success is. So is success, time from opening the app to when I submit, or is success time from when I start onboarding or whatever, opening the app to when I get my approval. So when you define that, it actually makes you understand what success should really mean for the people who use it. So if you're only looking at when you open the app to when you submit your application, then it may take another 2 months before they get their license approved. Then that's not, user behavior. Users will not be happy with it. But when you actually do it in a way that time to success is 2 days from the time you open the app, submit to getting your license approved. So, and what is the cost, and also moving the metrics from cost to serve. So, and always also moving the metrics to cost to serve, sorry, not from it. So introduce quarterly improvement cycles and a backlog driven by real data. So real data on usage patterns, not just vanity metrics, actually need to drive, improvement cycles. So you're looking at some organizations actually look at things like ease scoring, ease metrics. So how easy was this? How likely are you to recommend and all that. Also, real data usage, looking at drop-off times, also mapping into the customer journey to actually see where customers drop off and how you can gathering data on how you can improve it. So integrated payments and compliance checks to remove manual work. Yeah, so you need to have that, those partnerships, payment integrations, API integrations with payment platforms, and compliance checks. So everything needs to be on one system, not just, tossing them up and down. Yeah, that also leads to some discontentment with the users. So publish a performance dashboard for transparency. So of course, this cannot be overflogged. People need to see um, how the product is performing, not just about vanity metrics and all. They need to see publications quarterly, monthly, annually on how the product and the outcome is performing, what it's actually solving. So key insight: the system improved because ownership and funding were continuous, not because the first release was perfect. Again, you don't really aim for perfection in your first release. So it's actually about Kaizen, continuous improvement. You keep building, you keep improving. So, and you put that and funding there to make sure that these things are in place for continuous improvement and delivery. So there is actually no perfect first time release. There's actually no perfect R1 release one or whatever. It's actually based on what you keep building on. So funding model, the real barrier. So you cannot run products on project funding. So why project funding breaks product? So annual budgets encourage rushed scope and rushed release. Again, budgets are put up annually. You have every year, you have budgets for that. So, and this actually makes the scope and release rushed. Everybody wants to deliver by year end or something. Yes, even when you have 2 year, budgetary allocations and all that, it's all rushed up. But, product thinking is actually multi-year, goes keeps going and going and going. So there's no budget for iteration, user research, or service improvements. So, budget is just for when is it going to be released, and at the end of that day, nothing else. So maintenance is treated as a cost, not as strategy. So maintenance should be treated, sorry, as a strategy, not as a cost. So it should be part of um, the strategy in place for that particular product. So, but in project thinking, maintenance is treated as a cost. It's not even in the plan at all. So, what a product-based funding model looks like. So, there is a multi-year funding envelope with clear outcome targets. So, every year you have something released with clear outcomes. So, you're saying, okay, you're pumping this money in to reduce the ease of doing business, to reduce the housing crisis, or housing onboarding prices and whatever, or allocation prices and all that, then there should be rolling improvement cycles backed by a stable team and regular value reviews. So how do we measure what? So if you measure delivery, you will optimize delivery. But if you measure outcomes, you will optimize outcomes. So typical project KPIs. So project KPIs actually look at, okay, what has been delivered in this quarter, or what can we deliver in this quarter? What can we deliver within this budget, and have all modules been completed? Once the answer to these things are yes, then everybody says good night and that's it. But product KPIs, that public and large organizations should look at should be adoption rate and repeat usage. So what's the adoption rate? What's the repeat usage? How many people keep using this? Active users and drop-off points. So what are the number of active users we have every month? Or what are the drop-off points? Where do they drop off? And what are their reasons for drop-off? So cost per transaction. What is the cost per transaction? What does it take to actually, handle one transaction? Then we also have processing time reduction and error rates. So user satisfaction and complaint volume. So yes, you must always have CSATs, that's customer satisfaction scores, and metrics, and complaints and NPS, Net Promoter Score, and all that. Then reduction in manual workload for staff. So there should also be measurable outcomes in manual workload for staff. So changing governance, so project versus product. So most failures are governance failures disguised as delivery failures. So, and here we are going to be comparing, what we need to change in products versus product. So in projects, we have steering committees that only meet for approval. The products actually looks at it in a different way. There are product reviews that assess performance. It's not just about having, committees that only meet, okay, when are we approving this? We are approving this budget for so release and all that. No, it should actually go beyond that. Stage gates, no. Product says continuous evaluation. There must be continuous evaluation. Sign off culture, is it just about signing and, sign off and what do we have to do? Okay, sign on. No, it should be about learning culture. So the culture of learning is very important. So it should be about learning culture, not just sign off. So what impact has what we have released actually brought about? What is it aiming at? What impact has it changed? What has it changed for the users and all that? Static reporting, no. We need to work with live dashboards for products. So how do we build the right teams? Of course, we've been talking about owners all the time, and owners are people. They are people in a team, and how do we build them? So durable products are built by stable cross-functional teams. So in public sector and large organizations, this would actually mean bringing policy experts, engineering, design and service, design teams, data and analytics, operations, and frontline staff. So, and even more. So it's not just about these people, but it's actually about bringing all these people together. Operations and frontline staff actually cover a lot of people. Data analytics and analytics, very important. They actually feed the organization with the real analytics and data that they need to drive product optimization and improvements. So what happens when you don't do this? So the predictable outcome of project-only delivery for persistent services. So what are the outcomes? What are the predictable outcomes? So systems get rebuilt with every administration or with every sponsor change. So when a new administration comes in, or when a new sponsor or CEO comes in, systems get rebuilt. So procurement cycles repeat while user needs remain unmet. So every time you're, buying and rebuying and rebuying, but then the actual user problems are not solved. What the user actually needs is not solved. So fragmented systems that do not talk to each other. So you just have systems here and there, but they actually don't work with each other. There is no integration at all. So trust erodes because services don't improve. Then institutional fatigue builds because teams keep restarting the same work. So again, systems keep getting, every time there's rework, actually just building the same thing, and it leads to institutional fatigue. So a framework for transition, how do we move from projects to products in 5 steps? So the first of the 5 steps is identify persistent services that must exist year after year. Assign permanent product ownership with clear accountability. Again, this points to ownership, this points to how to build teams. Then shift to multi-year funding tied to outcomes and learning, not output, but outcomes and learning. So there should be outcomes. Define outcome metrics. So what are you aiming to solve? What are the outcomes? And publish them transparently. So every quarter, every month, you have to put it out there that because of this product or because of this issue has dropped from this rate to this rate. People should see it. It should be published publicly. And establish continuous feedback loops and quarterly improvement cycles. So there must be feedback loops and quarterly improvement cycles for that. So early wins we can implement now. So the things to do. So we need to keep ownership post launch for at least 12 to 24 months. So we need to have owners post the day of launch or the day of delivery for the next 1 to 2 years. Publish service performance metrics quarterly again. Run user research before policy finalization, not after rollout. So we need to run user research before the policy is finalized, not just after rollout. So this actually helps us in planning. What are we even planning? We can't do it after we've already released it. We need to actually do it before we even start what we are planning. Then create a live backlog from complaints, data, and front lines. Then run small experiments before national or statewide rollout. So before we go, we scale and all that, we need to run small experiments, pilot programs, pilot phases, pilot releases in small groups, experimental groups, before we actually go, this actually helps because when you do it, in small setups, you actually understand the problems better before you go, all out there. But when you go all out there, the problem is actually heavy and massive than, doing it in small pilot phases. So how do we design institutions that learn? So a product system survives political cycles when the institution learns faster than leadership changes. So what are the 3 pillars of an institution that learns? Data visibility, feedback loops, and authority to adapt. So there has to be data visibility, there has to be the right feedback loops, and there has to be authority to adapt. So this is product management at institutional scale. So how do we build feedback into the system? So without feedback loops, you have static governance. With feedback loops, you have adaptive governance. So what do we instrument? Drop-off points and failure reasons. So we need to know, okay, what are the drop-off points and why, what are even the reasons, you see? So we need to have this data, real time, quickly and all that. Then time taken per stage, time to success, error rates, time to success, error rates, and rework rates. So we need to know time to success. Again, you need to define what success should be like, you see, and this is also where, user research and all that should come in. So users, I wouldn't want to rate time to success as when I submit. I want to rate it as when my business has been licensed. Then complaints and support themes plus frontline staff pain points. So authority to adapt. So many systems fail not because they lack data, but because they lack permission to improve. So what are the questions to ask? Can teams release incremental improvements safely and regularly? Are teams empowered to actually do this? Can funding be adjusted mid-cycle based on evidence? Point two and point one is actually agile thinking. You see, most projects actually follow this waterfall approach. You get, but agile thinking actually adjusts based on feedback. You see, it adjusts based on customer feedback over fixed contracts and all that. So do procurement contracts allow iteration or lock change behind change requests? So your product contract should allow iteration, not just, any small time, you have to raise a change request for that because it's out of scope, you see. So if every improvement requires political approval, the service will stagnate. Of course, you know how tough having management or political approvals can be. So if all your improvements actually require that level of effort, then there's a high chance you're heading for stagnation. So what's the memory of institutional architecture? Again, remember we are moving from political memory to institutional memory. So what survives political cycles is what is documented, visible, and repeatable. So designing the memory of the system. So how do we design the memory of the system? We need to have public dashboards that track service performance, a documented product vision and principles, career product leadership roles, not temporary assignments, not ad hoc or temporary assignments, but it has to be career product roles, standardized service design playbooks, and reusable patterns. So the system must outlive its sponsor. So, and what is the bigger idea? The goal is not to deliver initiatives. The goal is to build systems that get better even when leadership changes. So it's not just about launching. It's not just about the due day. It's not just about, when it's go live. It should actually be about, systems that get better. Again, get better. That's the key word. So there is no perfect release. It's actually about continuous improvement, even when leadership changes. So projects end, products evolve, but institutions must endure. Leaders come and go. You see, projects end. You see, so a leader will come, launch one or two projects, sorry, and that's the end of it. But products actually keep evolving. So again, from the typewriter era to the smartphone era, so your product must evolve and transcend, whatever leaders come in at some point. So I hope we've actually been able to see, the whole view of how to move from project thinking to product thinking, and how product thinking actually shapes problem solving over time, not just about, ribbon cutting or project commissioning dates and all that, release dates. So thank you very much for being a part of this. Hope to see you again. Thank you.